Hello, hello, my lovelies. This is Nini, and you're watching my channel. Today, I thought we'd take a look at the most recent addition to the boys' love genre from South Korea, secret relationships. A story about the toxicity of obsessive love, its inherent effects on the psyche of all those involved, and how tactics such as manipulation, coercion, and intimidation are facilitated by the uncontrollable desire to control that which must be claimed at all cost. Secret Relationships, based on a manhwa of the same name, tells the story of Daon, a quiet and reserved yet kind-hearted office worker who is embroiled in a problematic love quadrangle between two different friends from college, Jaemin and Soo-hyun, and the newest ace employee to join his company, Chu Song-hyun. From the beginning, it becomes blatantly obvious that Daeon's relationship with Jaemin and Soo-hyun carries a threatening air, as his interactions with the former seem practically sinister in their seeming perfection, while his interactions with the latter are a masterclass in the inherent terror felt by victims of abuse. Told from Daeon's perspective, the story focuses on the budding yet reluctant romance between him and Songhyun as they begin to work together and get to know one another better, all while counterbalancing this seemingly innocent fresh start to love with the complexities forced upon Daeon due to his tumultuous relationships with Jaemin and Soohyun. Sungyeon, hereafter referred to as Assistant Jew, stands in as the story's better alternative, a tentative quote-unquote green flag character who seemingly understands and accepts every nuance of foible and flaw that Daeon carries. He plays the role of the White Knight, destined to save our main character, not only from the evils lurking all around him, but to save Daeon from his own bad decision-making and lack of agency, consequently helping Daeon heal from his traumatic past and present. And boy, does he need saving. Throughout the story, the audience becomes privy to not only Dan's history with Jaemin and Soohyun, but also learns of the lengths to which both men have gone to ensure their continuing relationship with our main character. Emotional manipulation, threats, intimidation, assault, conspiratorial machinations, familial coercion, gaslighting, and the obsessive need to control every bit of Daeon's life are just some of the tactics employed by the two to corral Daeon into the perfectly manicured destiny the pair demands he remains forever shackled to. Their ideal notion of a perfect life, given the circumstances and their inherent rivalry for Daeon's affections. The plot, in and of itself, could potentially be seen on paper as quite a convoluted mess. So, to better understand the dynamics shared mostly between Daeon, Jaemin, and Soohyun, let's break it down. Spoilers from here on out. Daeon meets Jaemin first. Having somewhat of a fascination slash interest in the relatively popular older man, he is surprised when Jaemin offers to be his tutor to help him succeed in college, but readily accepts. As time passes, Daeon's feelings for Jaemin change, growing more romantic, but his own lack of confidence, tied with his feelings of unworthiness, stops him from mustering up the courage to confess. Stuck in this limbo, Daeon soldiers on until he meets Soohyun. Attracted to Soohyun, it is implied that Daeon puts aside his feelings for Jaemin and begins to explore the potential of a relationship with this new man. By all accounts, his relationship with Soohyun is mutual, feelings shared, and the potential for it to be actualized grows more and more every day. Seeing this, Jaemin's jealousy rears its ugly head as the possibility of losing Daeon becomes more and more likely. To counteract this, at first Jaemin leverages his influence as Daeon's quote-unquote friend to undermine Soohyun at every turn. When that fails, he concocts a plan to use Soohyun's own lingering insecurities and fears of losing Daeon as a ploy to coerce him to agree to a potential stalemate, in the form of agreeing to fake date one another, only in front of Daeon, of course, so that Daeon will no longer be able to pick one or the other. This development forces him to choose instead between his feelings for both men individually and their perceived happiness together as a couple. Eventually accepting that his fate can no longer be tied to the new couple, Daeon tries to live with the fact that he is now the third wheel. Feeling isolated and stuck, Daeon concludes that in every way that is important to him, he is fated to be alone, unwanted, and unlovable. But his desperation for that wanted connection soon leads him into a series of choices that, in retrospect, are naive and dangerous, wherein he's attacked and nearly assaulted by another student, but saved at the last minute by Soohyun, who then proceeds to beat the assailant to a bloody pulp in retribution, all in front of Daeon. This traumatizes Daon and triggers a fear response so devastating that he ends up utterly terrified of Soohyun in every way. Jae-min subsequently takes advantage of this and, through some manipulations of his own, manages to not only secure his place at Daeon's side as his best friend, but also tricks Soohyun into leaving the country before he is implicated and found out by the police. Soohyun, thinking that this is the best way to protect Daeon, falls for Jaemin's lies and goes abroad, leaving Jaemin unfettered access to Daeon without the possibility of losing him to his rival. Jaemin then proceeds to systematically ingratiate himself into every aspect of Daeon's life and begins to actively undermine any potential new love rival from getting close enough to Daeon to win his heart. The plot, on its face, begins rather simply. Daeon has a not-so-cordial run-in with Assistant Ju the morning before he starts work at their company. For the first few days/weeks, the pair's interactions are contentious, warping into bouts of pettiness until they are awarded a position on a new team for a big upcoming project. After some very real conversations about their relationships thus far, they eventually agree to put their little grudges behind them for the sake of the job. This agreement clears the air between them, and soon Daon and Assistant Ju begin to find themselves more comfortable with each other. Assistant Ju, the adorable golden retriever that he is, eventually catches feelings first and confesses. However, Daon is immediately resistant to the potential new relationship, not because of anything Assistant Ju has done, but because of all the baggage he's saddled with because of Jaemin and Soohyun. Daeon's misplaced quote-unquote love for Jaemin and his recent interaction with the violent and aggressive Soohyun has put him on the defensive towards Assistant Ju's feelings, because he's not only unsure about how he feels for Jaemin, but also because he's afraid that Soohyun could have another violent, overly possessive outburst and hurt his new suitor. To protect him from this believed threat, Daon turns down Assistant Ju only to find the man unwilling to walk away without a metaphorical fight. He tells Daon flat out that he can wait for him and proceeds to push down as much of his anxiety about their relationship in hopes of supporting Daon. For the most part, he succeeds in being a reliable workmate and friend to Daon, though a few times he is jealous and protective to the point that he actively steps in to protect Daon from Soohyun, emulating the white knight trope he was written to be. Eventually, once everything is settled with Jaemin and Soohyun, all the past comes to light and the plot is done. Daon and Assistant Ju end up together, therefore giving audiences a proper ending to the romance and the happily ever after that most fans of BL look forward to. But what many find fascinating about secret relationships isn't the love story between Assistant Ju and Daon, it is the master-level writing and complexities of its fascinating and monstrous villains. One of the best things about any dramatic plot is the antagonist of the story, our villain whose sole purpose is to make our main leads as miserable as possible. These characters, who are destined to ruin everything they touch, set fire to our new lover's world, and pull out all the stops to break our protagonist's heart as brutally as possible. There's nothing like a good villain, someone you just love to hate. And oh boy, does secret relationships have a doozy of a pair. Arguably, Jaemin is the true villain, but the drama itself tries very hard to juxtapose his manipulative, borderline psychotic machinations against Soohyun's overly aggressive, hyper-dominant, and controlling nature. In the very first interaction between Daon and Soohyun, the audience bluntly sees their dynamic. Soohyun is an outwardly possessive, hyper-fixated, controlling narcissist, and Daon finds him incredibly intimidating, frightening, and a danger to both himself and everyone around him. The fear is there, in your face, and so objectively undeniable that the audience's first impression is visceral and automatic. While this speaks to the level of acting and writing within Soohyun's characterization, this false narrative is misleading. Compared to the source material, you quickly realize that the show's screenwriters have done Soohyun's character dirty and made him much more of a monster than his original iteration. He's not a saint by any means, but the overly wrought misinterpretation of his characterization attempts to make Soohyun just as bad as Jaemin, if not worse, solely on the physical danger he exudes. Frustration and exasperation are the two major factors that contribute to Soohyun's behavior. Unable to cope with the situation his naivete managed to pigeonhole him into, he lashes out of a desperate, deep-seated need to maintain even the slightest amount of control over Daon and his own feelings. Feeling trapped by the manipulation that drove a wedge between him and Daon to begin with, his behavior evolves into extreme forms of possessiveness so unlike his true self that Soo-hyun becomes a galaxy-sized red flag, unable to resuscitate his original loving and dedicated personality. He is too far gone and not of his own volition. His fall into the darkest parts of himself renders moot any attempts to rein in the unholy amount of cruelty and emotional trauma he has inflicted, both on Daon and, more importantly, himself. Jaemin, however, is a true villain in every sense of the word. From the jump, his manipulative, obsessive nature and malignant narcissism are almost blatant in their obviousness. His unhealthy desire to keep Daon at his side, the lengths he will go through to accomplish that goal, and the cruel machinations he employs to see that there is no chance for escape, securely root his every thought and action directly into the soul from which grows a true supervillain. He cares not for others, whom he hurts in the process, or how he does it. The goal always remains the same, and anyone who dares to intervene, be it through direct and deliberate action or happenstance, is automatically deemed an enemy he must dispose of quickly. This leaves Jaemin in a position wherein he is primed to undermine any relationship Daon dares to cultivate outside their own dynamic. It's why Jaemin manipulated Soo-hyun into a contract that forcibly stopped them from dating Daon, and why Daon has yet to have a meaningful relationship with anyone outside of their decade-long love triangle. It's implied, and in some cases outwardly confirmed, that Jaemin has spent the entire length of their quote-unquote friendship diligently manipulating every single one of Daon's relationships to intervene in any potential long-lasting romantic relationships. To put it in common vernacular, Jaemin cock-blocks every new potential lover before the romance can even start, thus leaving Daon locked into the hell of static loneliness he created out of pure selfishness. For years, every manipulation and machination Jaemin employs effectively maintains that control. Having ingratiated himself fully into every aspect of Daon's life, Jaemin retains sway over both Daon and his family, playing the role of the best friend and savior whenever anything, and I do mean anything, goes awry, thus making his existence crucial to every aspect of Daon's life, no matter if that is actually true or not. It's this fallacy, Daon believing that Jaemin is a good person who simply cares enough about him to help him in the direst of circumstances, that allows the cycle of emotional manipulation and psychological abuse to continue. A mastermind through and through, Jaemin's schemes and tactics further his intentions and serve as a perfect example of the monster that lies beneath trope. On the surface, he seems extraordinary, a fine specimen of the best friend or perfect partner trope often aspired to. But once you dig even an inch below the surface, you find an unholy abomination worthy of exorcising. Daon as a character is a perfect example of what abuse victims can and often do suffer from those who claim to love them. Arguably, his defining traits is a man whose simplistic naivete, lack of healthy skepticism, innocence, and an inability to recognize the potential and terrible cruelty of the world around him effectively breeds an environment so constrictive that he becomes perpetually the proverbial bird trapped in a hellish cage, imprisoned in a life wherein there is a semblance of autonomy, but in all actuality, he has none. While Daon seemingly lives his own life, has his own wants and needs, the feelings of normality is only skin deep. A fantasy deliberately created by Jaemin to deceive Daon into believing that he has a good life. For the most part, Daon falls for this constructed and well-designed lie, believing in the truth that, while he struggles, the complacency he exhibits and maintains is completely normal and, more disturbingly, healthy. All of which is undeniably and unequivocally false. Jaemin has successfully manipulated and gaslit Daon into a version of a life tailor-made to keep him right where he wants him, a plaything that only has eyes for him and will automatically default to seek him out whenever he is in need. Cracks, however, begin to form within such a glorified facade with the introduction of Assistant Jew. His appearance in Daon's life and their budding feelings almost instantly become an injection of reality outside of Jaemin's sphere of influence. To Daon, Assistant Jew becomes an outlet for the massive amounts of self-loathing and the nearly unending self-sabotage he has pressed upon his own life, thus allowing him to self-reflect. More importantly, however, Assistant Jew's reassuring and understanding presence, paired with the stability and unconditional love he offers, becomes an avenue through which Daon's stilted and oppressive desires for love and acceptance can be fully realized, giving him the chance to not only break free from the cage designed for him, but also allowing him to find true happiness with someone who actually loves him. It is this pure but fantastical love that ultimately saves Daon from both Jaemin and Soohyun's tight-fisted control. Yet the signs of his years of trauma remain. Daeon's inability to feel even the slightest bit of certainty of his decisions and feelings carries with it a weight that moves mountains, speaking to the true harm often left behind to fester because of the cruel abuse of others, and how the harm continues to prolong a person's suffering years and even decades after freedom is achieved. While we don't know the future of Daon past the final episode and chapters, it is plain to see that he will have a long road ahead of him trying to heal from the past and the residual effects still clouding his every thought and action. While it should be painfully obvious now, secret relationships, narrative acting, delicious villains you both hate and feel sorry for, and thought provoking insight into the truly heartbreaking and world altering effects of abuse bring to the fore a perfect example of how form and function can outshine even the darkest of narratives. Daeon's personal growth, how he reacts and reflects on the path his life has taken since he met Jaemin and Soohyun, and ultimately his decision to move past it all for the love that respects the very essence of him, offers an intimate look into what path we all hope to take should we ever find ourselves trapped in a toxic relationship. Ultimately, as a fan of the grittier side of BL, I find that secret relationships ticked all the boxes I wanted in an adaptation. Though there were some fundamental changes from the manhwa that I did not necessarily agree with, the show managed to encapsulate the very essence of the story's characters, themes, and message well enough that I was thoroughly impressed, garnering the production both my admiration and a well-deserved 10 out of 10. As far as I'm concerned, Secret Relationship has managed to set the bar for the best BL of 2025. So high, in fact, that it's going to take a great deal to unseat it. Let's just hope that we may have some actually good shows this year that will be worthy to compete. And that's it for me and my review of Secret Relationships. For those who have stuck with me this long, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions about the show and if you agree with some of my interpretations and opinions or not. So please leave me a comment below. And as always, I would like to thank everyone for spending a little time with me today and thank you for your support. See you next time.